after that experience with Scott, I spent my summer looking for help. And I couldn't find it at the university. I couldn't find a discipline class. I went down to the Denver Public Schools Professional Library and checked out books on discipline, and they were written by B.F. Skinner, and they were all about operant conditioning and behavior modification. I couldn't figure out how to make that work. In desperation, I asked my wife maybe if some therapy might help, and we figured out how much therapy you can afford on a 1968 teacher's salary. And how much is that? About what you can afford right now, right? So that was out. And so I decided I would train myself not to get angry. So I said to myself over and over and over and over, I put myself to sleep at night saying, I'm not going to get angry, I'm not going to get angry, not going to get angry. And what had I inadvertently done? I had programmed myself to think more about anger than anything else, and the next year was tough. 3 different times I came that close to having it with another kid. And I went to the counselor and I said, you know, you won't see me next year. I'm out of here. If there's anybody in the world who should never ever work with kids, it's me. I've got a short fuse, I've got a controlling personality. I don't dare slap another kid, so you won't see me next year. And she said, Jim, don't do that. All you've been able to think about all your life is teaching. You can do it. But what you need to do is study the behavior management experts at our school. I said, well, you've got to be kidding. We don't have any behavior management experts. Psychologist comes once a week. All she does is test kids. She never tells us anything we don't have. She said, oh, yeah, we do. We actually have teachers on this staff who can get kids to walk through fire for them. You need to study and copy those teachers. And I thought to myself, oh, sure, old bag Barlow, that permissive old bat who teaches next door to me, I think I'd throw up if I had to talk like that to kids. Because she's always saying really stupid things to kids like, please and thank you, and would you could just make me rich. And now I am not proud to tell you that that was my view of the world in 1968. That I viewed people who were kind as being weak. Now, a question for you. Can you be very kind and very strong at the same time? And isn't that exactly what Love and Logic teaches us how to do? But I wanted to teach, so I decided, okay, I'll watch her. And I'll talk to her. And I visited with her, and I said, what's the secret to discipline? And she said, the secret to discipline is never let them see you sweat. Never let them see you sweat. I said, well, what does that mean? She said, well, there's only a limited number of things we can do when kids misbehave. Some teachers make it look really easy, and some teachers make it look really hard. And if you make it look hard, the kids will think, well, maybe they've almost got you. So she said, never let them see you sweat. Well, I decided I would talk to her kids and say, so I said, what's Mrs. Barlow like? And they'd say, oh, she's really nice, but you don't want to mess with her. I said, why? They said, oh, she could do awful things to kids. I said, really? Have you ever seen her do awful things to kids? No, but she could, man. Because she always made everything look so easy. I still didn't have a good picture of it. And then one day, I'm out in the hall. Mrs. Barlow is out in the hall. And here comes a kid down the hall violating a major school rule for 1969. Now, the nice thing about this is he's going to have to pass Mrs. Barlow before he gets to me, and she's going to have to handle that. And if she thinks she's so good, let's see her handle that one, right? What do you suppose this kid was doing that was an extreme violation in 1969? Worse than chewing gum. Oh, yeah. A lot worse. Shirt tail hanging out. Oh, yeah. Teachers knew in 1969 if a kid's shirt tail falls out, you can't teach them nothing. Their brain locks up, for crying out loud. You can't teach them anything till you get that shirt tail back in. Now, I was not good at getting kids to cooperate with me or to work hard for me, but I was good at 2 things. And so I spent most of my time on those 2 things. Would you like to know what they are? Number 1, putting up bulletin boards. Number 2, supervising shirt tails. I loved it. Give me a chance to get my power needs. I could be around that school. But not today. Mrs. Barlow, if she thinks she's so good, is going to have to handle that. And I'm thinking, if she's so great, let's see her do that. And she took me to school. Never even raised her voice. That kid came down the hall, and just when he got to her, she looked at him and she grinned. I already knew it was going to be something stupid, you know, grinning at this kid. And then she called him Sweetie. And then I knew I was going to hurl with that, you know. And she said, Sweetie, will you put your shirt tail in? Thank you. And this kid turned on her. Old lady, you ain't my teacher. I don't got to listen to one thing you tell me. You don't tell me squat. I was shocked to hear him talking back to that like that. And then, to make it even worse, he said, so why don't you just go screw yourself? I couldn't believe I was hearing that. And Mrs. Barlow handled that without taking a deep breath. She just looked at him, and then she grinned. And she said, oh, that's such a bad decision. I'm going to have to do something about that. But not here in front of your friend. I don't want to embarrass you in front of your friend. I'll tell you later today. And then she added, try not to worry about it in the meantime. Now, I could tell that bothered that kid because he says, old lady, you don't scare me none. But his friend had already figured it out. His friend is looking at him and says, you're going to get your ass kicked. And then, of all things, Mrs. Barlow just turned her back and walked away. And I thought to myself, see, no wonder we have discipline problems in this school. Look at this permissive approach. Now, by the way, did we have discipline problems or just Jim? A little projection going on there, I bet, right? Oh, okay. Well, I've been trained you got to do something right on the spot or you lose the teaching moment. She's walking off. I decided I would watch her. She did something I'd never thought to do before. She went down to the principal and she negotiated for her support before she opened her mouth to say what was going to go on. Would you like to hear the phrase she would use with her principal that got her more support than anybody else on the rest of the staff? Would you like to practice it with me?
Yeah.
Okay. And we say this in a nice professional voice. Got this situation.
Got this situation.
Here's what I'd like for us to do.
Here's what I'd like for us to do.
Will those actions get either one of us fired? Now, since then, a lot of people say it this way. Got this situation. Here's what I'm hoping we can do. Do you have enough support from the superintendent to be able to do that? Okay? See, I had never thought to do that. My approach always was to jump right into the fray, and if I'd been in that situation, I'd said to that kid, okay, that's detention for you. Okay, you're going to be kicked out. All right. See? Then I'd have to run down to the principal and say, you better support me on this. Now, Dr. Prophet had a famous saying. He was our principal. Of course, it was famous to me anyway. Well, Jim, I can support anything but stupidity, and that borders on stupidity, so you're on your own. Which would force me to have to go down to the teacher's lounge and announce that we get no administrative support around this school, right? I'd always leave out that little section that we get no administrative support when we do stupid things, but that wouldn't have been okay. But anyway, she went down to the principal and said, here's what I'd like for us to do. Do you have enough support, and so on. And then she said, I have to go meet my kids. They're coming back from specials. So, Dr. Prophet, you need to plug the holes on this before we do it. Now, he knew what that meant. One of the holes that needed to be plugged, would you guess that that has to do with his mother? Yeah. And he called up Mother. Now, he had a phrase that got him more support and less criticism than anybody else. Would you like to hear that one?
Yeah.
Would you like to rehearse it with me?
Yeah.
Here we go. Got this situation. Got this situation, and I don't want it to become a problem for you. And I don't want it to become a problem for you. Let's hear the whole thing. Got this situation, and I don't want it to become a problem for you. How much goodwill and support will that get you? Yeah, and so that's a pretty powerful little thought. He called her up, and they talked it over. In the meantime, Mrs. Barlow is back teaching her class. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, this young man gets called down to the office. When he walks into the office, there's 3 people there, sitting there, staring at him, not saying one word, just staring. There's Dr. Prophet, the principal. There's Mrs. Barlow, the teacher. There's his very own mother, and what are they doing? Staring, yes. Which forced him to have to say, what? Now, Dr. Prophet also believed, never let them see you sweat. Make it look easy. So he leaned back in his big chair and he says, young man, I understand that you just told Mrs. Barlow that she could go. Would you turn to your mother right now and explain to her why that would be in everybody's best interest here at this school? Now, what kind of an answer did he have for that? Did Dr. Prophet just hand this problem right back to that kid? And isn't that one of the important tenets of love and logic? When a kid causes a problem, we hand it back, but without anger, without lecture, without frustration. And this kid, and he ended up, she can't be talking to me like that. That make any sense? But a miracle happened. You tell me if this is a miracle. His mother sat there and still stared, and she didn't say one word. Is that a miracle? How do you suppose that happened? Do you suppose that was a hole that was plugged? Did Mom and Dr. Prophet work that out? So that gave Dr. Prophet a chance to lean back in his chair and say, I know it's hard to explain. So why don't you explain to your mother that you've earned a 3-day suspension, and you're welcome to return on Monday. And now he said something that is so politically incorrect that I don't even know if we can say it on this segment. He said, you know, when you get kicked out of school because you make problems, you are not allowed to turn that into a problem for your teacher. Your teacher is not obligated in any way to come up with an alternative course of study for you while you're gone. The problem with being kicked out of school is you don't get to learn what the other kids learn. Now, does that sound like heresy right now? How many teachers do you know who are spending more time creating alternative courses of study for the kids who misbehave than they are actually teaching the kids who are doing the job? Yeah. Well, he said, now, some kids, they help themselves. Some kids get their friends to bring home the assignments. And some kids try to do something really nice for a teacher to see if the teacher will help them keep up. And some kids just blow it off completely. And all those options are open to you. You have to decide what kind of a life you're going to create for yourself. And then he said something, you better hang on to your seat. Can you hang on to your seat real tight? Because this is going to sound horrible. Okay? This is so politically incorrect. He said, you need to understand something. America cannot afford for all kids to be successful in school and get high school diplomas and college degrees. Because if everybody was successful in school, who would clean those motel rooms across the street? Who would clean up the vomit out there in the nursing home? Who would pick the strawberries? And there's a job for everybody. And some of those jobs make your life better. And some make them very hard. And you need to decide what you're going to do with your education, and you're excused. Well, Mom stood up, didn't say a word, jerked him out of the chair with his earlobe, marched him down the hall, and the last thing they heard as they left the building was Mom saying, we'll deal with this at home tonight. try not to worry about it in the meantime. Now, where do you suppose she learned that? And, by the way, who had all the power in that school that day? Was it Jim Fay with his loud voice, his intimidation? Or was that sweet little lady who never raised her voice above this, who violated all the rules I learned about discipline at the University of Denver? Would you like to hear what those rules were? Yeah. They were called the Foundational Principles of Discipline, University of Denver. First foundational principle was, oh, let's see, how did this go? Try to get it in the right order for you. Never ever smile before Christmas. That's okay. Yeah. Now, I tried to be a good student. And when I went in as a student teacher, I put on that fierce face. And I looked tough. And then when I was a new teacher, I put on that fierce face. And I looked tough. And did the kids look at each other and say, wow, now there's a highly effective teacher. We better behave? Or did they say, let's get it on. This is going to be fun. Okay. Now, the other rule was, if you have exciting lesson plans and good exercises for the kids and good experiences, you will not have discipline problems. Understand that's still taught from time to time, right? Okay. Well, can you have the best lesson plans in the world and best preparation in the world and still have kids that come into school so wrought up from what happens at home or in the neighborhood that things don't go well? Yeah. And what was the third one? When kids misbehave, there should be consequences. The consequences should come when? Immediately. And if you don't have an immediate consequence, you lose the teaching moment. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you're really good at coming up with immediate consequences to teach some of life's really important lessons while you're working with 20 or 30 other kids at the same time. Anybody good at that? No, nobody is, and nobody apologizes for it or should. See, to come up with good, meaningful consequences, it takes some time to figure it out, just like Mrs. Barlow did. She took some time. She visited with the principal. They came up with a plan. Then they plugged the hole. And then, and only then, did they tell him what was going to happen. Okay.